As a quote Wacom guy, I'm often asked about the use of the pen tool. Now, I'm not talking about the stylus that you use with a tablet. I'm talking about the pen tool in applications like Photoshop and Illustrator. I suppose I'm asked the question about the pen tool because it's common to refer to the stylus that you use on a tablet as a pen. But I'm quite sure that the other reason that I get the question is because there's a general misunderstanding of what the pen tool does and ultimately why someone would want to use it. So I'm hoping to shed a little clarity on the use of this tool. So let's take a look at the general use of the pen tool. For starters, I've got the physical pen in my hand, and I'm going to select the pen tool within Photoshop. To create a path, I'm going to tap once with my pen to the tablet to create an initial anchor point. As I place my pen to the tablet a second time, I'm creating what is called a segment. With each placement of my pen, or tap if you will, to the tablet, I'm creating additional segments and then finally closing the path by tapping on the original anchor point. Now I've got a path, and this path can be used to do a number of things. We can create a shape from this path. We could manipulate it, of course. We can also make it into a selection. To manipulate the path, you're going to select the Direct Selection tool, and that can be found right below the pen tool within the toolbox. Tapping outside of the path, you'll see that we've got a solid line right here that goes all the way around. Now, when I tap with the Direct Selection tool on any of the individual segments, you can see that I can drag them out and manipulate them and move them around. Additionally, I can tap on the individual anchor points and drag them out to create entirely different shapes. Again, this is a very simple, straightforward use of the pen tool. Now, where it gets a little bit more difficult is when we take a look at creating curves. Remember that a segment can be either straight, as in the case here, or curved. To do so, I'm going to select a pen tool once again, and this time I'm going to tap to create my initial anchor point, and I'm going to place a second point, but this time tapping, holding my pen to the tablet and dragging outward. And I'm going to drag in the general direction of where I want my curve to go, and in this case, I just simply want to create this sort of a oblong oval sort of a shape. Now I close the path once again by clicking on the original anchor point. And if I were to select that Direct Selection tool once again and tap outside of the path, you can see that I've got this sort of rounded or curved shape. Again, made up of individual segments, but this time they are curved. Now, to manipulate a path, what you would do is you would use a couple of different tools. My favorite is this Convert Point tool. The Convert Point tool can be found underneath the pen tool, or alternatively, when you have the pen selected, when you hold down the Option or Alt key and hover over any of the individual anchor points. Now, what I want to do here is I want to convert one of these anchor points that happens to have direction handles back into a single point. So as I tap with my pen on the individual anchor points, it gets rid of those direction handles to create, again, a straight segment. Now, alternatively, if I had the Direct Selection tool selected, and we've got this original path that we created, and let's say we wanted to then drag those individual anchor points out so that we could create some direction handles. Same kind of process. This time holding down Option or Alt key, tapping with my pen tool selected on the individual anchor points and then dragging outward, you can see that I am converting the anchor point into a point with handles. And now I can create that oblong sort of shape. Once again, holding down Command, tapping outside of the path, I can create that sort of an oval. So it's really simple to convert your anchor points to points with direction handles or eliminate those direction handles so that you can get these nice sharp corners. The option's really up to you. So now that we know a few of the basics about the pen tool, we're going to take a look at a practical example of why you would want to create a path and ultimately what you would do with it. In this example, I've got a photo of a vase and some artificial flowers that I want to ultimately make a path around so that I could create a selection and lift it up off of the background and perhaps place it on something else. So to do so, I'm going to zoom in up here in this area here, and I've got my pen tool selected, and I'm going to start my path by simply tapping anywhere within the image and then sort of tracing it by placing and tapping in individual anchor points. Now I can create straight line segments by simply tapping from one point to the next, or I could tap, hold my pen to the tablet, and drag around to create curved segments. Now keeping in mind, ultimately what I'm trying to do is to create a smooth selection or a smooth trace job here, And to do so, I want to drag my anchor points out in the general direction that I want to go in my next move. And I'm just going to simply place a few of these points here, and we're going to go ahead and fine tune those as I kind of get over here, and then we'll just kind of finish this up. I'm not going to go over the entire image with you here so that you can, for the sake of time, but now that I've kind of wrapped this around, created a single path or a closed path, I'm going to zoom in where I started and point out how I did this. So this is where I started here, and then I created these straight line segments for the first couple of points, and then I started to create some curved line segments to then trace around the image. Now I want to manipulate these by holding down the Command or Control key and tapping on one of the individual anchor points to bring up the direction handles. So now with the anchor point selected, I can tap and move these these handles around so that I can manipulate the curve and get it to go a little bit smoother in the direction that I want. Now, one of the things I haven't pointed out yet was that sometimes when you lay down some of these anchor points, you may find that they look okay when you're zoomed out, but when you start to zoom in, you maybe wish you had additional anchor points. One of my favorite features of the pen tool is this feature right up here called Auto Add and Delete. Now, if you look underneath the pen tool itself, you can see that you've got this Add Anchor Point or Delete Anchor Point. That is separate tools to do the same thing that these Auto Add and Delete functions provide. So if I have, for example, let's zoom around here. Let's say we wanted another anchor point maybe right in here. Let's say we wanted to try to follow this red line. All I have to do with my pen tool selected is hover anywhere over the next segment, and you can see a little plus sign appears. That is that auto add anchor point. You can see we just added that little anchor point right there. And from there, we can go in and start to manipulate that curve and get it to go where we want it to go. Again, using the direct selection tool that I'm temporarily selecting by holding down the Command key. Now, I ultimately didn't want to do that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over that anchor point once more. You'll notice that a minus sign appears next to that pen tool icon. That is the auto delete icon. Again, all of that function, or those functions are there because this little checkbox is turned on. That is the auto add and delete icon or function, and that eliminates the need to have to come over here and select these individual add anchor point or delete anchor point tools. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to zoom back out here, and instead of using this path that I've started, I'm going to go over here to the Paths panel and show you that I've created a path that goes all the way around this object for the sake of time. Now, with that work path created, I can very quickly create a selection from it by simply hitting Command and Return when that path is selected. Now, right now, we just simply have a background layer. So if I were to hit Command or Control and J on the keyboard, I'm going to take what I have selected and place it up on its own layer. Now, we don't have a background readily available to drop this on. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer beneath this layer 1, and I'm going to fill it with a somewhat neutral color. I'll just go down here to fill with 50% gray, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And now as I zoom in, you can see that we've got a pretty decent selection, or I should say we've got a pretty decent knockout job around this entire image. Now, again, if we zoom way in here, you can see some of the paths are a little tighter than others. I'm zoomed in a couple 100%, and this is pretty forgiving here. I don't think it's going to matter, but you can get obviously as tight or as loose as you want with the pen tool by going back and manipulating the individual anchor points to make your curves go exactly where you want it to go. So as intimidating or frustrating as the pen tool may have been for you in the past, I think you're going to come to find that it's actually quite forgiving, and it's a great way of making precise selections. I don't want you to sweat getting a path to go exactly where you want it to go on your first shot. You're probably not going to. But just know that you can easily move each of those individual anchor points and adjust those direction handles so that you can fine-tune your paths. And in the end, your shapes and selection will be as absolutely precise as they can be.